Celebrate the stories, the stars and the spirit of Greece on the big screen. The 30th Greek Film Festival with screenings between October 14 to 26. Experience a spectacular lineup of films including retrospectives of classics like Rebetiko and Dogtooth, tributes to Sydney's own filmmakers, and a special focus on Greek cinema legends like Renos Charalambidis and Pantelis Voulgaris. Don't miss the latest international standouts, The Return with Ralph Fiennes, Maria with Angelina Jolie, and incredible new films from Greece and Cyprus. Tickets are on sale now. Visit greekfilmfestival.com.au/Sydney to secure yours today. There's no Ouzo talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Sound is.
We are back for another episode of Ouzo Talk, and Nick, I can't believe it, mate. It feels like ages since we were in this room to do a live episode with someone in the room, right?
Look, it has been, Tom. We've had such a vast of international guests come on, and they've been fantastic, but we've all been remote. But how good is it? We've got a legend in the room, and we can talk to him face to face.
I know. I mean, we've been very fortunate over the last few months to be able to have the likes of Professor Paul Cartledge for the third time. Can you believe it?
Unreal.
Victoria Hislop, an amazing journalist, author, and whatnot. But today, we're back at home. And we were talking off air just before. I mean, you grew up with the gentleman that's sitting in the room with us right now. I did as well, and he's actually part of the reason why I decided to take up journalism. So it's a little bit intimidating to some degree, if I'm honest about it. How does it feel for you?
It is. Well, look, it's deja vu, hearing a familiar voice in my lounge room, and I thought, shit, I've been having this voice for, 40-odd years or maybe
45.
45 years. There you go.
There you go.
But look, it's fantastic. And look, like you said earlier, our international guests have been fantastic. Our show's grown immensely, even more now.
I know.
We've hit our 151st country, would you believe?
Unbelievable. And where was it, Nick?
Yeah, it's our Ouzo brothers in Samoa.
Fantastic.
So hello to all our Ouzo brothers out there in Samoa. Thanks for tuning in. It was actually Lokasho's episode they listened
really?
to.
So they love a bit of the Lokash over there, huh?
Yeah, there you go. Don't know. Something in his voice. Don't know.
I know.
He's a funny guy, though.
He is a funny guy. Fantastic. All right. Well, I reckon let's get into it. So without any further ado, our guest today in many ways was a pioneer in Australian broadcasting, being one of the first newsreaders of Greek heritage to appear in the mainstream media. He has been a trusted voice that's helped inform, entertain, and connect to audiences for more than 4 decades now. Wow. From political reporting in Canberra to covering the United States as a foreign correspondent, he's been at the centre of history-making moments, presidential elections, royal visits, papal tours, Olympic Games, and much, much more. His career has spanned all of Australia's major networks, including Channel 7, Channel 9, and Network 10, where he anchored national news, fronted primetime programs, and even helped launch a groundbreaking 24-hour news channel, Sky News. Wow. He's worked alongside legends of broadcasting, including the great Graham Kennedy on Coast to Coast, hosted documentaries, helmed his own nationally broadcast chat show, and much more. But he's arguably best known for having taught Australians from coast to coast in this amazing country the sheer joy of asking for an envelope in Greek. Joining us in the distillery is, I can scarcely believe it, John Mangos. Welcome to Ouzo Talk.
Yes, Aspedia. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, mate, it's awesome to have you. I just still can't believe you're here.
Well, I'm here, live in person.
Mate, and I was going to say, it hasn't changed.
Well,
he hasn't. And but the thing is,
but anyway,
you're in top shape.
You're in good nick.
What I was going to say though is that I can't see a screen next to you with the latest news. It's very strange.
It's a pleasure to be here, boys, and I love my Uzaki, so it's great to be part of Ouzo too.
Fantastic. I can't believe
we have a vast array of bottles here on the table.
I can see that.
Tipura or Uza, the Tapadaola.
Are we going to go through the whole lot of them while we're here?
If you really want. I mean, it's one of those things. This show can be very dangerous.
Can it?
I'm not sure that you've been on a show quite like this before,
okay.
John.
Well, hopefully, yeah. So we got a whole array of Tsikudia today, courtesy of our sponsors. But should we get into that and have a drink?
Yeah, let's get into it properly. What do you reckon?
Ella, yamas.
Let's have a drink.
Yamas.
Cheers.
Yamas. John.
There we go, boys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Right.
Welcome.
So, Nico,
Oh,
this is good.
the nectar of the gods.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Nick, tell us what we're drinking.
Well, we have the collection, Tom, finally, the 35N Tsikudia collection.
We've collected the whole card collection.
We were missing the blue bottle. We had all the others, and how good is a Greek Providor? They heard the episode, and before we knew, poof, we had the remaining bottle missing.
It just manifested.
Just popped up. Crystal, you legend. So it's the Mark Grapes Spirit Blended. So the 35N Tsikudia Mark Grapes Spirit.
Mate, I got to tell you, this may be in line to be my new favourite. We've been sitting on the Muscat and Spinner, John, which is this one here, the red one.
Yep.
Very nice. This one's even smoother though, but it has a little bit of, let's say, a little bit rough around the edges in some way, but in oddly enough, in a very sort of cultured way. I don't know how to explain it. It's very nice.
Well, my favourite's the Barbayani Blue Label.
Yeah.
That's always been my favourite.
Yeah, that's quality.
Can't go wrong.
100%.
It's a great Ouzo. It's a wonderful Uzaki. Yeah.
Definitely.
That is the top shelf, isn't it?
It
really.
is.
I mean, the 35N Ouzo is amazing.
It's
too.
up there too.
Yeah, they're all up there.
We've tried it. But this Tsikudia, fantastic. So thank you to the Greek Providor. Check them out and check out their 35N Tsikudia range. There's 5 of them.
Yeah, thegreekprovidor.com.au. Get on there for all your alcoholic and pantry needs.
I'm looking at them now. Zilevo.
We'll get you in touch. We'll do something. Don't worry, John.
Classic.
Okay, so
Well done.
Where do we start,
I
mate?
know, Johnny Mangos. I can't believe he's here. I'm still pinching myself.
I know.
Mate, can we just start off with your background? So where are you from? And we'll start from there.
Okay. Both sides of my family are from Castellorizo.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a 100% Kazi.
There you go.
Now, it's an interesting story because both sides of the family left Castellorizo because of the 2 world wars.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather came to Australia in 1918
Wow.
as a refugee from the First World War when the island was occupied. And he was taken to a refugee camp in Port Said in Egypt,
Right.
and was processed there for 6 months. And they were working out where should we go. And his older brother Michali, because my Bapu Yanni was the youngest of the 4 brothers, his older brother Michali had come to Australia in 1908.
Oh, wow.
And checked it out, and he did the gold fields in Kalgoorlie, and did sugarcane cutting up in Queensland, looking for work.
Wow.
Anyway, he wrote back to the family, said, this is because some of them went to America, but most Kazis came to Australia. And so Bapu came out in 1918. It's an interesting story, my Bapu. He was studying pharmacy, and he had to learn French because that was the universal language of pharmacy in Europe in those days.
Wow.
And when he came to Australia to join his other brothers, so there's Lefteri and there's Athanasi and there's Michali, and my Bapu Yanni was the youngest.
Yep.
Sadly, they didn't recognise his credentials. And, I admired him because he was never bitter about it. And so the 4 brothers started a cafe in South Melbourne on Clarendon Street, just metres away from the Lakeside Oval. Now, I've heard you guys talk about South Melbourne Hellas, but the Mangos brothers were so anxious to integrate that they embraced the South Melbourne Footy Club, as in AFL.
Yes.
And I'll tell you a funny story about that. Have you got a moment?
Yeah, 100%.
So in those days, in those days, pubs used to close at 6 o'clock, and they used to call it 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
They used to call it the 6 p.m. swill. So last rounds just before 6, all the Australesi who were sitting around buying beers for each other would line them out, right?
Yeah.
But they'd have nowhere to eat afterwards because the pubs closed at 6.
Okay.
So they used to go to the nearest cafe, and in this case, it was they called it the Swan Cafe. And so the South Melbourne Footy Club used to after train, because in those days footy was not amateur, but they only got paid per game. It wasn't professional.
Sure.
So the players and the selectors used to come and have a feed at the cafe. And what used to happen is they'd bring the brown bags with the bottles of booze under their arms.
Oh, right.
Because every cafe in those days had a back room. And they'd go in the back room and have a drink. And you know what used to happen was on the Thursday nights after training, they'd go into the back room, have a few drinks and select the team. And then they'd have to, because there was no, there was no TV, there was radio, and there were the newspapers. And they'd select the team, and then from the cafe, they would call the Herald Sun newspaper, which was the Sun newspaper in those days, and tell them the team, so the paper the next morning could list the team. On my mother, now that was my grandfather who came out First World War refugee.
Okay, I'm just thinking now, the Mangos brothers listening to this, were any of them bookies by any chance?
No.
Getting inside tips?
No, they were very, very straight.
Okay.
And they had that cafe for many years, and then the four brothers all went into their own businesses.
Sure, yeah.
3 of them into cafes, 1 of them into fruit and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my mother's side of the family, Mum was born in Castellorizo. She left the island as a refugee also during the Second World War when the island was occupied. She was taken on a ship to Gaza.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Gaza that's in the news now. And she was held as a refugee there to be processed because she was from the Zervos family. Her father died when she was only 3 years old, so her oldest brother, Konstantinos, was the head of the family. They decided to come to Australia too because they knew that a lot of Kazis are coming to Australia. So both sides of my family came here as refugees. My bapu, which means my father, and he married in Australia, his childhood sweetheart from Kazi, Yaya Vangelia. And Mum came out after the Second World War, so she was born in Greece, but she was only 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And so after she was in Gaza for a few months, their family came here, and they worked same deal for a very famous cafe in Melbourne called Canis's Cafe on Bridge Road in Richmond. Now, that same story was just a few hundred metres from the Richmond football ground, and the Richmond players and the Richmond selectors used to do the same thing, bring the brown bottles under their arms because and they go into the back room and they'd select the team, and they'd get a good feed because in those days, see, this is post-depression, and while carpenters and boiler makers and plumbers were all going out of business because there was no work, people still had to eat. So all the Greeks seemed to go into the seafood business.
Yes.
And the Italians, as you know, went into the fruit and veg. And we sort of went okay. Well, when I say we, the Italians and the Greeks did okay during the Depression because people still had to eat food. So even though the tradesmen were going broke, they still had to eat. Yeah. And that's how the Greeks managed to get through the Great Depression.
Fantastic.
Wow. So Mum and Dad married in Melbourne at Evangelismos, which is where we were all married and christened and the whole bit, because I grew up in Melbourne, obviously. And then work took me all around the world, and we'll talk about that if you like. But
100%.
But that's the origins of my family. So both refugee families from Castellorizo, one from the First World War, one from the Second World War.
Yeah. And how far back do you go to the island? So Mangos and Zervos, are they common names in Castellorizo?
Reasonably. They're not the huge families. There are bigger families, but they're well-known families in Castellorizo.
Yeah.
I've been going to the island every year for the past 40 years.
Wow.
Because I love the place. It's my happy place. And I was fortunate enough 15 years ago, because we've got a family house there.
Yes. Beautiful.
But my Uncle Paul, who's since passed away, his 2 sons, my cousins, own the house now, is the famous blue house that was in the movie called Mediterraneo. And it was known in the movie as Casa de Butana, because because that's where she operated from. Anyway, so a lot of Italians now go there because it was an Italian film. But I've been going every year. And what happened was Uncle Paul would always say, all members of the family are always welcome to stay in the family house. But as the family got bigger, it got more difficult to book time to stay in the house. So 15 years ago, we built our own little house on Kazi. So I've got a house on Kazi.
Fantastic. Wow.
I've got 2 teenage sons who absolutely adore the place. And I built it partly for them and their legacy, a legacy from Dad. I want them to think he was a grumpy old bastard, but he got something. He got something right because they love having a house on the island.
Yeah.
And one of them's now 17, going on 18, and the other one's 16 or 15, going on 16. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine the pickup lines at the nightclubs? Hey, baby, I got a house in Greece on a Greek island.
See, this is the funny thing. This is what I say to my boys are even much younger than yours already, but already there's an understanding there that that's going to be useful.
And for me, it's because they're 4th generation Australian now, so they're very Australian technically,
Definitely.
but they've got Greek passports, and they're very proud to be Greek, and they love going back to the island, which I love because when I'm long gone, they'll always think of Dad, and I just think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And plus, they'll maintain their heritage.
Mate, so important. And the legacy will kick on. That's well done. That's beautifully said.
It's a whole idea.
It's so interesting as well because everyone knows, particularly in Sydney and Australia in general, the Kazi community is so tight.
Yes.
Such a small island, but such a big community here.
Yes.
What is it about this community? What's special about it?
It's special because they were, like the Catherians, we were the pioneers. We were the first 2 islands that really got here. Catherians came to Sydney, Kazis came to Sydney. In Melbourne, it wasn't so much the Catherians, it was the Ithacans. Oh, wow. So the rivalry that we have in Sydney between the Kazis and the Catherians was the same in Melbourne between the Kazis and the Ithacans.
Right.
Right? And they had the Leski where they'd go and play cards and have a smoke and have their kafadaki. And that's how the culture created. And there was, I grew up, there was a Kazi club and we used to do picnics and Christmas days and Santa Claus. And we had the famous the races around the track. And the most prestigious race was the Kazi Mile, where anybody, all ages could enter. And I trained for it one year and I won it. So when I was 17, I won the Kazi Mile.
Wow.
So
it was a sprint race.
It was a 1 mile race, so 3 times around the oval.
Wow.
And my Papu was so proud.
And you won it.
Yeah, Papu was an athlete.
Yeah.
He used to run around Albert Park Lake every Sunday morning.
Wow.
Really?
And so when his grandson Yanni, of his same name, won the Kazi Mile, he was beaming in the car on the way.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my upbringing. But look, it wasn't all beer and skittles, let me tell you. Yeah. And this is an interesting story that I like to tell because Australia was very different in the 60s. 1962, 63, I was in grade 4 at Flemington Primary School in Melbourne, which was a public school, not far from a housing commission complex, right? So it wasn't wealthy. And one day it was pissing rain outside, so we couldn't go out and have lunch. And so the teacher said, we're having lunch inside the classroom. And when I opened my lunch, like the other kids, the teacher said, whose lunch pongs?
Wow.
Pongs meaning stinks.
Smell, yeah.
And all the kids pointed to me. And I got detention for 1 hour after school because he didn't like the smell of my lunch.
Wow.
Now, if a teacher did that today, you'd get the sack, right? But that's what Australia was like in those days.
I'm not sure if I've told this story on the podcast or not, but you and I have definitely shared it. My dad, who was in primary school at the same time,
yes.
John.
Am I old enough to be your father?
So he tells the story when he was in primary school. He was in class one day. He must have been in year 1 or 2 or something. And he tells the story that they were learning about the royal family.
Yep.
They were talking about Prince Philip, and my dad, whose name is Philip as well, raised his hand and said, Prince Philip was born in Greece. He was born in Gergira, which is where I'm from.
Right.
Right? She sent him out of class.
Right.
It didn't agree with the narrative. even if it was factual, she didn't like it.
Wow.
And he tells that story today. He's like, that was the way things were.
Yeah.
So
he was Phil the Greek. That's what they used to call him.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that confirms it.
I met him.
Right.
He was a pompous bastard, to tell you the truth.
We all are from Kedkida.
So you met Philip.
And the Queen, on a royal visit, and she was charming. She surprised me because she was a lot shorter than I thought she'd be. But, he walked around with his hands behind his back and he was, chin in the air and looking down through his nose. And I thought, oh, you pompous asshole.
Well, he did leave Greece in a crate of oranges.
Well, this is true. This is true.
He was lowered down.
He was smuggled out of the country.
Right.
That's right.
Wow. And did you talk to him in Greek? Did he?
No, he didn't.
No
speak
connection
Greek.
to his Greek?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Wow.
So that's the Mangos family history. We are refugee stock. Which means I've got a very, in this modern age, when we read about refugees, I've obviously got a very soft spot for their plight, because both sides of my family were in that situation. So we weren't immigrants. We were refugees.
So what year was it with your grandfather?
My grandfather was 1918.
1918.
Mum was 1945.
Wow.
So First World War, then Second World War.
So it would have been so different.
And Mum was on, look, when the island was reclaimed by the English and given back to the Greeks, because Mum had been sent to Gaza, an English ship called the Empire Patrol came to get them, to bring them back to Castellorizo. The ship caught fire on the way back. There were hundreds of Kazis on the ship to come back home because the English had reclaimed the island and given it back to Greece.
So who had it? The Italians got it?
The Italians.
Okay.
Anyway, the ship caught fire. 35 people died. My mum had to tread water for 12 hours. She was 13 years old while they waited for the rescue ships, the boats to come and collect them. Took them back to the island, and they went, "No, we've had enough. We're getting out of here. We're going to Australia."
Wow.
So Mum was a survivor of a famous. And there have been books written about it. The famous ship called the Empire Patrol, which because the worst thing that can happen on a ship is a fire. And they worked. They had a post mortem, for want of another expression, and apparently what had happened, because in those days they were using candle lamps. And in the doctor's clinic, they had the candle lamps, and apparently a nurse had knocked over one of the lamps, which had candles in it. And of course, that's what created the fire. And that's the worst thing that can happen on a ship. Mum, she never talked about it. It was obviously a very bad memory for her. She told us that it had happened, but when I'd try and push her for details, clearly she just didn't like to talk about it. But one thing she did tell me, which I guess people, now that we're seeing the conflict in the Middle East as we see at the moment, you can imagine that hygiene in those days was very different. And they've got all these refugees in a camp in tents. And Mum's lasting memory, remember she's a young girl, 12, 13 years old. The only way they could maintain the hygiene was they'd get the males, the females and the children to strip off. And Mum, obviously, as a little girl, must have been horrified to see all these naked people, adults. And they used to hose them down, which, think about it, is a good way to keep them clean. But it's barbaric. And that's one memory that Mum did share that clearly stayed in her mind. So Dad grew up in the cafe. Dad inherited his father's cafe, because by then Bumble bought a cafe in the city of Melbourne on Elizabeth Street. Mum worked at the Canis's Cafe in Richmond. And so xenophobic was her big brother, Theo Costa. She was only 13. They didn't send her to school. So she had to work in the Canis's Cafe, washing dishes, cleaning, tables. So Mum never got an education. And she married at the age of 19.
Wow.
And had me at the age of 20.
There you go.
In fact, I've done the math. They married in September. I was born in July. So it's pretty much spot on 9 months. So
Wow.
Dad must have gone berserk on the wedding night.
There you go.
I'm interested to hear, though, John, as a newsman who's covered a lot of these types of conflicts and modern refugee crises and seeing what's currently happening, how does it affect you when you think the same shit is happening today?
Yeah. Well, look, after years of reporting, it sounds terrible to say this, but you become a bit immune. You become a bit detached because you've got to be objective in your reporting. So you can't afford to get too emotionally involved. And having said that, I was a late father. I didn't have I married late. I was 43. And we didn't have our first kid till I was 50. When I became a dad, and I was reading news at Sky News at the time, and a couple of stories came up where young kids were killed in motor accidents or whatever, I croaked up because after I'd become a father, it hit me harder. Yeah. And I had to throw to a commercial break because I got choked up, because you think of your own beautiful kids, and think this could happen to anybody's kids. So
definitely
that probably affected me more than reporting on faraway conflicts.
Yeah.
Because, my whole training, I did journalism at RMIT in Melbourne, and in those days it was all about objectivity. It wasn't about opinion. These days there's a lot more opinion because of devices and streaming and internet. We get the news a lot faster during the day. In those days, people had to wait till the 6 o'clock news at night to find out what happened during the day, or buy the paper the next morning. There was no other, or listen to the radio, but there was no other way to get the news. So we were very well trained to be objective. But some stories touched me. I was on the air on the 24-hour channel the morning that Princess Diana died. And the updates were coming from all over the place, and there was a lot of misinformation because in France they knew that she had died, but they said that she was in hospital and that she was okay. And the reason for that, we found out later, was because they didn't want to announce it to the world until they told the boys who were in England, right? So they didn't want the world to find out before her sons found out. So they made up all these stories that she was seen walking around the tunnel, that she came out of the ambulance, that she was in a hospital ward walking around. She was dead. Yeah. But they didn't announce that until later, and we found that out.
So you're saying they're all made up? They made up those stories?
Yeah, the palace put out bullshit.
So it was the palace that...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You don't mind me swearing on the show, do you?
Not at all. Greek, English, Turkish, whatever you like.
Good English.
Yeah, fascinating. Look, you said something interesting before about reporting, so opinion versus factual.
Yeah.
So... obviously, that's changed in the last 10 years or since the internet.
Absolutely.
So do you think that's part of why society now don't trust mainstream media?
Absolutely, because, see, what's happened is in those days, our traditional evening newses and our newspapers, right, we were trained journalists, and we had the luxury in those days because the media was making money. Kerry Packer made a fortune out of Channel 9, as you know, and Fairfax was doing well. Herald Sun was doing well because there were no other forms of news consumption. So we had the luxury of working on one story a day. So I could triple check, make 10 phone calls, and right, these days, because of all the streaming and everything, the audiences have dropped considerably. So revenue at the TV stations has dropped. And that's why every time you pick up the paper once every month or two, you read about redundancies in television and newsrooms. And these young kids that are now, and I mean kids who are our reporters, they're being sent to 6-7 stories a day. So there's no time for checking and fact-checking. The other thing is this. We used to get tips and letters and phone calls from lunatics, crazy people. And
we still get them.
Yeah, but see, we would file them in the rubbish bin because we knew they were lunatics. Today, anybody can start, no offence, fellas, but anybody can...
No, we agree with you.
Anybody can start a podcast. Anybody can start, a blog, and they can propagate their rubbish, and people who believe they're rubbish follow them.
Absolutely.
And they get an audience of their own. Even singers now are bypassing the big record companies and going and broadcasting themselves on YouTube and TikTok and all these other
self-publishing on Spotify
and bypassing the big record companies. Where in our day, it was the record companies that dictated who was going to be a star and who wasn't going to be a star. So, the internet, for all its value, has absolutely diminished the quality of journalism in this and most other Western countries, and that's just technology. That's just technology taking over. And now we've got AI, And that's going to take it to another level.
That's the hardest thing for someone like us. We're trying to work out what is the truth these days.
Yeah.
And the more you look into it, the more people have an opinion, even listening to newsreaders.
Yeah.
I feel like it gets very political now on the news as well. Like I know with our newspapers, for example, I don't know if it happened back then, but for example, Daily Telegraph, again, I'll just use as an example. My understanding is they're more right-wing views.
Yep.
So and Sydney Morning Herald was more left-wing views.
Yes.
So you might read, so at the moment we've got, say, Labor Party, which is left-wing. The Daily Telegraph will write, say, crappy things about the police force or whatever the state government looks after, schooling, whatever. Yeah. But the Sydney Morning Herald, which is left-leaning, would say positive stuff.
Because they have their agendas. Rupert Murdoch and his family are very powerful. You know, they can dictate who wins an election or not. And I'll tell you another interesting fact. You know, when I worked in the newsrooms in Melbourne, it was Brian Naylor, and in Sydney it was Brian Henderson, and the jingle was Brian Told Me. Many people would remember that.
Remember it clearly.
Sure. Yeah.
Channel 9 was, luckily for me, and by the way, I was the first Greek on Australian mainstream. In fact, in those days it was all blonde hair and blue eyes, and I was the first WOG on mainstream television news. And what happened was I was hired. I started in newspapers. You'll love this story.
Yep.
And after 3 years, I decided I wanted to go into TV. Because
so what were you 78 we're talking about?
Yeah, I was 75 in the newspapers, and then 78 I joined Channel 9. So
in Melbourne.
In Melbourne.
Yep.
So I applied for the job, not expecting to get it, but I wanted them to know that I was interested, so that if I tried again, the boss would go, "This kid's tenacious." Anyway, I made the shortlist, did a screen test in the car park, and I got the job.
So what's a screen test?
A screen test is where I went down in the car park with one of the producers, with a cameraman, and he asked me a whole lot of questions so they could see what I looked like on TV and how I presented and whether I had a voice. And I got the job. The interesting thing was the news director at the time, who was quite legendary, a fellow called John Sorrell. He got the list down to 4. And he said, "I've only got 3 spaces. So if one of you don't want to do this or you're not sure, put your hand up now, because I'm only going to hire 3 of you." No one put their hand up. He said, "Right, well, I'm going to sack one of you in 3 months' time." And I thought, geez, I've already got a safe job at the Herald newspaper. Do I want to take the risk? And I did take the risk. And as we were walking out the door, he said to me, "Mate, I've got 200,000 Greeks in this town. I need a WOG in my newsroom."
Oh, wow.
Which was foresight on his part, because all the Greeks in Melbourne who were watching the other channels switched to Channel 9 because Elinas, Elinas.
One of us.
And then the Italians, and then the Lebanese. So the ratings went up because all the WOGs started watching Channel 9 because we were the first channel to put an obvious WOG on air, and it went from there. So I opened the door a little bit, but now the young Greeks who are doing it, and we have many now, they've busted the door down. Yeah. They've busted the door down.
Wow. So you were the first.
I was the first obvious non-Anglo-Saxon on mainstream Australian news.
We said it in the intro, Nick. Pioneer. We have a pioneer.
And, you know, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, because a lot of the letters that I got were from parents of young kids saying, "Bravo, Yanni, you're showing us that if you can do it, in a domain that is so white Anglo-Saxon, we can say to our kids, if he can do it, you can do it." And that's probably what made me most proud.
Well, just in our family, I mean, we would watch the news of an evening. Yeah. And it would always be, my granddad would always say, "Αυτός είναι Έλληνας," right? Yeah. And it was always you and Mary Kostakidis.
Yeah, well, she came a bit later. After I started, George Danikian started at SBS, but then SBS was the ethnic channel, it wasn't a mainstream. Yeah. And SBS started a few months after I started. But again, George was stereotyped because it was an ethnic station, of course. Whereas I was there amongst all the Anglos, so I got all the WOG jokes and the Dago jokes.
So what was it like walking through the corridors and being the first non-Anglo?
Look, the newsroom was very kind to me, but I did get the WOG and the Dago jokes, but it was done with affection. It wasn't done spitefully, but they still let me know that I had dark skin and black hair, you know, and what we'd call today Middle Eastern appearance.
Did you get all the crappy story? They say,
No. To their credit, I got this, mind you, I worked my ass off. I had to work twice as hard as the others to prove that I was there not as a token Greek, but as a respected reporter who'd come from a major metropolitan newspaper. So I worked twice as hard. So when the others didn't want to work on Good Friday and Saturday nights and Sunday shifts, and I did them all because I wanted to show that I could, that I knew what I was doing. And as a consequence of that, 3 years later, I got promoted to Canberra, where I reported alongside Peter Harvey, Canberra. And I was Peter's 2IC.
I loved Peter.
And I've got to tell you, the first piece of advice he gave me, because I was very green, I was very ambitious, and I wanted to break stories, and I couldn't believe, because I'd gone from Little Melbourne to now Canberra, which meant the stories were now national. So I was being seen in all the other capital cities because the stories were going out nationally. And Peter sat me down and he said, "Mate," and I tried to do his voice.
Very good.
It is good.
He said, "Mate, it's all very well to have great information, but if you can't communicate it effectively, it's like pissing in a wetsuit. You get a nice warm feeling and no one else knows about it." But he's right. But he's right. Yeah. I've held on to that advice because it's all very well to have a great story, but if you can't communicate it effectively,
100%.
well, it's no good to you, my audience, because you don't understand what I'm talking about. So the skill is to try and communicate it in language, plain English, that people can understand. So Canberra was fantastic for me because I got to travel with the Prime Minister, who at the time was Malcolm Fraser.
Wow.
We went to the White House. I met President Reagan. We went into the Oval Office. We went to Japan. We went to China. We went to Canada. It was a world trip. Malcolm Fraser was a very pompous and arrogant man. And as you may well know, and most of Australia knows, the day he called the election for March 5, in 1983, Bob Hawke knifed Bill Hayden on the same day and became leader of the Labor Party. And that election campaign ran for 31 days.
Wow.
And Bob Hawke, of course, became Prime Minister. Now, when we used to travel in the Prime Ministerial plane, the press would sit at the back and Malcolm's office, because they had telex machines and an office and everything at the front. So he and his staff would be at the front. Malcolm never came down to the back of the plane to talk to the press, right? Never. Bob would come down every half hour to cultivate us. He'd come, he'd tell jokes, he'd sit alongside you and get to know you. And
why does this not surprise me?
Yeah, exactly. And because that was part of Bob's popularity, right? He knew how to cajole people. He knew how to win people over. And by coming down to the back of the plane, of course, the stories written about him were far more favourable because we were getting inside information, whereas Malcolm was kept his distance, was very aloof.
Was he like an introvert personality versus Malcolm Fraser?
He wasn't introvert. He was just aloof. He had a superiority complex.
Wow.
He'd come from a rich farming family in Western Victoria, so he grew up in wealth. He went to private schools. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He just thought we were all beneath him. But Bob knew how to cultivate the media, and that's how he's pretty much rock star status.
Definitely.
Well, right up until his death. I mean, look at what was happening at the cricket with him sinking piss every year.
That's right. But he gave up the drink while he was in Parliament.
Yeah.
But then he took it up big time after.
He made up for it.
He did.
Yeah, because he had a record. Was it
the yard glass?
Yeah, the yard glass of beer.
Was it Oxford or Cambridge?
Oxford, I think it was.
Yeah, he was a Rhodes Scholar. So it was Oxford.
Yeah, so you had the drinking record at Oxford University for drinking a yard glass the quickest.
That's
right. See, irrespective of your politics or your stripes, that's a Prime Minister you can be proud of.
Well, he was a people person. Yeah. He was, he'd walk through a shopping centre, and everybody would want to shake his hand and touch him and get his autograph. Malcolm never walked through shopping centres. He just thought he was too good for that. Yeah. And as much as I admired Paul Keating, he was a bit the same. But Keating was clever, but not as aloof as Malcolm. But Keating didn't like people people touching. He didn't like going through shopping centres either.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't that sort of warm, embracing kind of guy, but he was very clever. And he drove the Hawke machine. He was the engine room of the Hawke government. No question about it.
Wow. So Hawke was the face, and
Paul Keating, who was treasurer at the time, he did all the heavy lifting, and Bob did all the showbiz. You know,
definitely, because he had great hair, Bob Hawke, mate.
The hair was amazing.
Fantastic.
It was amazing.
Hair, charismatic. And what did he say when we won the Melbourne Cup?
No, the America's Cup.
America's Cup. Yeah, sorry, we won the America's Cup. That if any boss
Sack someone for not showing up to work.
Today, they're a bum.
Yeah.
They're Prime Minister.
Mate, Bob said it. I'm going with it.
He went. Hawke, in one of the campaigns, he was up against Andrew Peacock, and the slogan for the Liberals then was, the answer is the Liberal Party. And Bob's reaction to that was, geez, it must have been a bloody stupid question.
Rowdy was good.
Yeah,
but I mean, for someone like yourself, going from Melbourne to being on
national TV,
not just being on national TV, but flying with the Prime Ministers and whatnot.
Yep.
What was your family thinking at this point?
Okay, so it goes like this. We had the old-fashioned, Greek-Australian family. In those days, they expected of their children, and I was the oldest, right? Medicine, law, and if you couldn't get into medicine or law, the family business. Yeah. Anything else in between was a failure. Yeah. So when I came home and said, I've applied for journalism, it was like there was a death in the family.
Yeah. Τι πράγμα? Τι θα κάνεις?
Yeah. Hazor, you know. So my father didn't like it because he thought it was an embarrassment. Mum was a peacemaker, like a Greek mum. Mum just wanted, love. Until my name appeared on the front page of the Herald newspaper, the main story, and Dad tucked the paper under his arm, went to the pub and just casually put the paper on the
or yours.
And, love it. And then,
but if you did something wrong, to your mum, or your
put this manas to soy.
Exactly right. I'll tell you this story. Why I switched to TV. So in those days, what used to happen in the press, because they were using film, there was no videotape in those days. So we'd drive to a story. Let's say it was a fire. We'd drive in a car with the cameraman, the photographer. He'd take his photos, jump back in the car, and get straight back to the office to process the film. And the journo had to stay at the scene. No mobile phones, so we'd have to find a phone booth or knock on someone's door and say, "Can I use your phone?" Then we'd file the story down, over somebody's phone, and then have to catch the train back to Flinders Street where the office was. And then our weekly expenses, we'd put in the tabs for the train tickets. 25 cents for a train ticket. Meanwhile, the television guys were coming in the choppers, coming down, shooting, shooting the story, jumping back in the helicopter and going back to, and I'm going, I want to do that. That's me. I don't want to be catching trains back to the station. Oh, I want to be in the helicopter. And as I say, I applied for the job and I was lucky enough to get it. Yeah.
Amazing.
But they were very different times. As I say, I got the wog jokes, but they were with affection. I've got to give credit here because we didn't have a comeback in those days. I've got to give credit here to the boys from Acropolis Now because they came up with Skippy, Skippy the Kangaroo, and that gave us a comeback. You call me a wog, I'll call you a Skippy, and wog meant obviously garlic munching, salami, all these beautiful things that you've got here in front of us, mezedes.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Celebrate the stories, the stars and the spirit of Greece on the big screen. The 30th Greek Film Festival with screenings between October 14 to 26. Experience a spectacular lineup of films including retrospectives of classics like Rebetiko and Dogtooth, tributes to Sydney's own filmmakers, and a special focus on Greek cinema legends like Renos Charalambidis and Pantelis Voulgaris. Don't miss the latest international standouts, The Return with Ralph Fiennes, Maria with Angelina Jolie, and incredible new films from Greece and Cyprus. Tickets are on sale now. Visit greekfilmfestival.com.au/Sydney to secure yours today.
There's no Ouzo talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providore. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidore.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providore, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
So Skippy was our way of getting him back, saying, you have no culture. At least we've got something.
Yeah.
So we had a comeback. So coming up with Skippy was quite clever because it balanced things up a bit in terms of affectionate insults, because they were mostly affectionate. Unlike these days, where there's genuine animosity between Muslims and Jews and other nationalities.
Interesting, yeah.
Iranians, Iraqis, there's genuine animosity, not made better by the fact that we've got a war going on at the moment.
Yeah, a couple of wars. Yeah,
a couple of wars. Yeah,
yeah, crazy. So when you're in Canberra, were there any Greek Australian politicians around that time?
Yeah, there was a guy called Georges.
Okay.
There was a guy called Petro Georgiou from Melbourne.
Okay.
There was a guy called Bolkus.
Nick Bolkus.
Nick Bolkus. Yeah. And he was from Adelaide. I got to know Nick very well.
Did you guys sort of connect?
Very
Greek
much so.
Straight away?
Very much so. Very much so. But I've got a better story than that.
Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, I've got a better story than that. So I did such a good job in Canberra that they promoted me to Sydney to be state political roundsman. And I, again, worked very hard, did a good job, and the promotion for that was to go to Los Angeles, where I covered the biggest story of the day in America and filed it back to Australia every day. Now, can you imagine a country of 350 million people? There was always a shooting, a school shooting, something going on. I covered the 1988 election campaign between Michael Dukakis and George Bush.
Okay.
Now, it goes like this, and this is a really interesting story. In those days, Reagan was the president, and the Democrats' front-runner was a guy called Gary Hart, who was the governor of Arizona. He was a shoo-in. He was handsome. He was intelligent. He was popular. There was no way he was going to lose the election, except that one weekend he was a pants man. He went away with Don Henley of the Eagles, the musician, who had a boat, and they had a couple of babes on the boat for a dirty weekend.
Yeah.
And stupid Gary Hart had a photo taken of himself with this blonde bird with big boobs sitting on his lap on the back of the boat, right, with his arm around her, and the boat was called Monkey Business.
Oh, wow.
You can't write that shit.
No, that photo got out, right, on every newspaper. He was dead in the water.
Yeah.
So then the Democrats were left with 7 candidates that no one had heard of. They called them the 7 because Gary Hart was so far ahead of the rest.
Yeah.
That no one had heard of the other 7. And a producer from A Current Affair rang me and said, look, the American primary election system is very different to Australian, and Australians don't understand it. Why don't you pick one of the 7 candidates and follow him around to try and explain how the primary system works? And I thought, well, okay, I'll choose one of the 7. One of the 7 was Michael Dukakis. He was the Greek former governor of Massachusetts. And so I thought, I'm latching on to Dukakis, Greek-American, Greek-Australian. Well, we hit it off famously because George Stephanopoulos was on his staff, who's he's a famous broadcaster.
Amazing.
And I got to know his staff very well. He granted me many, many interviews. We got to know each other very well. And I was at the Democratic Convention when he got the nomination, and boy, was I hoping he'd become president, because I thought, I'm going to have an entree to the White House if this guy becomes president.
You put your money on the right horse.
But I did. But, by his own admission, and George Negus was at the time, he was the host of the Today Show. Okay. And we did a live cross from the Democratic Convention. And George said, John, as a Greek-Australian, how does it feel to you to see a Greek-American running for president? And I said, George, it makes me feel as though if my grandfather had migrated to America instead of Australia, it could have been me.
Good answer.
But I was bitterly disappointed when Dukakis lost, and he admitted later that he took the blame because the Bush campaign played dirty in their campaign. Dukakis took the high ground. He said, "I'm not going to fight back dirty. I'm going to remain above it and stay clean." His staff said he was 17 points ahead at some stage.
Really?
Yeah,
Shit.
Months out.
This is George Bush Senior.
Senior.
HW.
Yeah. One of the things they got him on was apparently in Massachusetts, somebody got jailed for either rape or murder, and he got out very early. And so the Bush campaign made a big deal about the revolving door jails. You know, you go to jail in Massachusetts and you get out in no time, and, created a scare campaign that this is what America's going to be like. We're going to have criminals on the street. And Dukakis refused to bite back dirty. And by his own admission, that was a strategic error and why he lost the election.
Wow.
Yeah. But a really lovely man and a highly intelligent man. And he had his own problems. His wife was an alcoholic. His son was his stepson because she'd already had the son. His cousin was Olympia Dukakis, who won an
actress.
Who won an Academy Award. And so this all played in his favour. So I backed the right horse, but the right horse didn't win.
Bloody hell.
But I was very proud of my friendship with Michael Dukakis.
Yeah. Did it continue after that?
Yeah, we stayed in touch. Yeah,
wow.
He became Dean of Yale, I think.
Yeah.
And he's retired now. She died. The wife, Kitty, she died. But he's elderly. Last time we spoke was about 2 or 3 years ago. A radio station put us together, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he sounded very frail.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many American presidents did you meet in your time?
I met Reagan.
Yep.
I met Clinton.
Yeah.
Wow.
I interviewed Jesse Jackson, but he never became a president,
Got
of
close.
course.
Yeah.
But the two that I met were Clinton and Reagan.
Okay.
I wished I'd met Obama, but I was gone by then. I was back in Australia.
Yeah. What was Reagan like? Because I feel like he's a bit of a comedian.
Yeah, look, he was very charismatic.
Yeah.
Very charismatic. Towards the end, he started to lose it a bit, as you know, and Nancy was nudging him, saying, and he used to pretend he couldn't hear the question because he slowed down. He wasn't as bad as Joe Biden got, but he started to lose it. But America loved him because he'd been a movie star. Yeah. He'd been a governor of California. He was always well-groomed, and he always started his speech with a joke.
Yeah.
Which humanised him. So
definitely.
he was the Teflon president. Nothing stuck to him. He was very popular.
Definitely.
So do you look at the situation in the US now and think, geez, I wish I was reporting on this right now?
I do and I don't. Because Trump is a story every day. There's no doubt about it. So as a journalist, yes, ready-made stories. But I lament the demise of what was once a great country. I loved living there. Mm-hmm. I loved travelling around the place. It was safe. America's gone downhill fast. And my kids, when they were younger, I said, I'm going to take you there. And then when Trump got in, we all went, no way, not till he's finished.
Really?
Yeah. Because he's an evil man. It's all about him. It's all about him. All this tariff stuff. All this tariff stuff. All his mates made millions. Because what happened was all the stocks went down, and he said to his mates, "Now's a good time to buy." And then he remember a week or two later, he reversed the decision. Yeah. All the stocks went up, and they all sold and made a fortune. So he manipulated the market. Like who does that?
Yeah, wow.
So he's a very narcissistic, egotistic. I wouldn't say he's not evil, but his heart's not in the right place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to journalism, how...
I love that you're asking all the journalism questions.
I know. It's fascinating. It should be you.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Good, though. But how... So if you've got a story and you write, how biased is it? So if you see something, would your editor say, "Nah, you can't report that"? Does that ever happen?
No, because we were trained.
Or you trained to
in those days?
report a certain way?
You had to tell both sides of the story.
Good. Okay.
Equally, you had. My whole training was no one wants to know what John Mangos thinks, right? I tell you what that side says, what the prosecutor says, and I tell you what the defence lawyer says equally, and you make up your own mind if the lady who killed those people with the mushrooms is guilty or not.
So this is hard news now, obviously.
It's not for me to tell you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think most people would prefer that, I think.
Well, that's how it was in the old days. But as
I feel
say,
like it's not like that.
No, because there's no filter anymore. Because people can broadcast anything they like. We're here now. We can say anything we like. There's no filter. We can defame someone. We can actually.
But what about mainstream? Like 7, 9, 10, Fox, CNN?
Now, mainstream is suffering for this reason. Back in the 80s, before internet, before phones, before streaming, right? On an average night, Channel 9 would get 900,000 viewers. Channel 7 would get 800,000. Channel 10 would get 550, right? That's in the 80s. 900, 800, 550. And they used to charge for their advertising accordingly. If you reach 900,000 people, you can charge a lot of money for a 30-second ad. Tonight, if Channel 9 gets 200,000, that's a good night.
Wow.
So that shows you. So that's where the revenue has gone down, because people are getting their news from other places. If Albanese took a bullet now, in the old days, you'd have to wait till tonight to find out.
Yeah.
If it happened right now, our phones would be pinging and we'd be going, what's going on? What's going on? You'd check your phone, I'd check my phone. We're on air. And we go, Jesus, somebody shot Albanese. We'd find out within seconds.
Yeah.
I tell you something else. In those days, we used to go to the story with a cameraman and a sound recordist, right? Now everybody's got a camera and a video recorder in their pocket, right? So if you're Johnny on the spot, and that building sets on fire, and you're right next door to it, and you get the shot. By the time the news crew turns up 10 minutes later, you've got the best shot. So Channel 9's going to pay you for your pictures. Our pictures are going to be redundant because you were there, right? Remember when our teachers used to say to us in the old days, everybody's teacher used to say this when we were doing our maths, and they used to teach us we had to do our tables, and the teachers would say, you're not going to walk around in life with a calculator in your pocket. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Guess what? We all walk around, we've got a calculator in our pocket, we've got an encyclopedia in our pocket, we've got a video camera in our pocket, we've got a still camera in our pocket, we've got an audio recorder, right? We've got AI, we can ask, we've got Google, we can access anything.
We've got a library in our pocket.
We've got a library in our pocket, right? So in the old days, if there was an argument over dinner who won the 1956 Melbourne Cup and no one knew, you'd have to go and find an encyclopedia to look it up or something, right? Now you just go bang, bang, bang on your telephone, you find out in 2 seconds.
Well, not even, just ask it now.
We ask
Siri.
It. Yeah, that's right. That's true. It's true, and that's AI. You know,
It's interesting. I mean, the way that, and you spoke about it earlier as well, that the way that people now have all these platforms.
Yes,
it's certainly democratized. Let's call it information. It's because it's not journalism, but it's democratized it. But in many ways,
it's
diluted it down so much.
It's diluted the quality. There's no question, and that's why people trust the media less. I trust the media less.
Yeah.
I don't watch free-to-air TV anymore.
Really?
Yeah. I've got an iPad, and I dip into all the newspapers during the day when I've got 5 minutes. I check the Herald, I check the Sun, I check this, I check that. And that's how I keep in touch. I listen to news radio, usually the ABC, because I don't agree that the ABC is left-wing. A lot of people say that, it's got left-wing bias. I don't agree with that. I think the ABC is pretty fair. So I have it going on in the car all the time. So whenever I'm driving around, I'm always getting, because once you've got the news in your blood, and as you would know, it stays in your blood. Once you've done politics.
Every day.
And once you've done politics, I always read every political story, because once you've done politics, and you've had the buzz, it stays with you,
So very controversial question for you.
Yeah,
Put you on the spot.
I can handle it.
Who are good sources nowadays in Australia and overseas?
Oh, good question. In terms of mainstream?
In terms of mainstream.
Yeah, look, I still
because we have this argument all the time.
Yeah, I know. Look, I still think that in Melbourne and Sydney, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, who are assisting newspapers, still the quality journals. Having said that, because we already know the news today that they were going to print tomorrow, what we're seeing in those newspapers, which we never saw 30, 40 years ago, is a lot more opinion. So we know the story. So what the newspapers are telling us the next day is so-and-so's take on the story, right? So-and-so's opinion on the story. So we're getting more opinion in those journals than we used to, whereas before they used to tell us the news, right? They're probably still the quality publications. People underestimate the Daily Telegraph and the Herald Sun in Melbourne, the two tabloids in the morning. They underestimate them because they're populist and they're simple, plain English. But that's because they're appealing to a very particular demographic, right? And they do a good job of it, believe it or not. But having said that, the Murdoch press, the Australian in particular, I'm sorry, but for me, it can't be trusted. It can't be trusted. The Australian writes what Murdoch wants it to write. Now, if Murdoch wants Albanese out, he'll get him out. There's no question about it. He'll run a campaign. And now his son Lachlan's going to take over, and his son Lachlan is just as conservative as his father, which is why he's inherited the printing empire. And Fox News. And here's Sky News. It's not as fair as it used to be. In the days of Paul Keating, there were very specific laws that if you own newspapers, you couldn't own TV, and if you own TV, because they were worried about monopolisation of the news. If Channel 9 hadn't merged with Fairfax, which is what Kerry Packer tried to do, and he went to a parliamentary inquiry.
I was watching this video yesterday.
Right, to state his case. They said, no, you can't do it. You either have one or you have the other, because if you have both, you're monopolising the news. You're telling people what you want them to hear. But if Nine and Fairfax hadn't merged a couple of years ago, they wouldn't be able to stand on their feet. Now, Channel 7's surviving because Kerry Stokes has got the newspapers in Western Australia. Again, because they've combined the resources of the newspaper newsroom and the television newsroom to save money, because the same reporters are now doing both. Most analysts predict that the market in Australia by the end of the decade won't be able to sustain free-to-air television station. And it's most likely Channel 10 will be the one that falls off the cliff.
What about internationally in terms of those sources?
Internationally, look, I still read the Los Angeles Times. I still read the Washington Post. I still, the Washington Post was bought by, what's his name? The guy who started, not Jeff Bezos, Amazon. Who's the guy that started?
That is Bezos.
Bezos. Yeah. So he bought the Washington Post.
Wow.
In London, there's still some quality papers in London. I forgot to mention the Australian Financial Review. AFR is still a pretty good newspaper. But then that caters to a specific audience. That's very black and white. The company either went up 10% or down 5%. You can't sort of bullshit about that. It's pretty cold hard fact.
Do you have a story that you've regretted saying in your career, that you've come out with a story and think, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't have reported on this?
Well, not so much a story, but if you're asking me about my most embarrassing moment on television,
that'll do.
Here we go.
Sounds good.
Okay. I know we're going to talk about Graham Kennedy a bit later.
Yeah, we will touch on it.
Because obviously it touched so many Greeks. But we had this segment on Graham Kennedy where we had a cartoon, and it was a young female reporter holding a microphone to a bloke. And the competition was, write the caption. What do you think the caption should be? And the winner was going to get a JVC television and video recorder. It was, like a couple of $1,000 worth of prize. And Graham said to me, John, go through all the entries and pick the weird ones, and we'll read them out every night just for a bit of fun until we choose the winner. And I'm going through them, and I'd find some odd ones. Now, Pedia, I don't know how far we can go with this, so I'll put it in your
push.
One of them said, with the guy saying to the girl with the reporter, how would you like a pearl necklace?
Okay.
Now, I didn't know what a pearl necklace. I was innocent enough to think that a pearl necklace was what my mum used to wear when she went out.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what it's vernacular for? Well, I didn't, okay? So I've said this on air, and everybody started laughing, and all the cameramen are going, cut, 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 cut. And everybody's laughing, and Graham's laughing, and I'm going, what's so funny? What have I said? And Graham's going, I'll tell you later. And I'm going, no, not tell me now. What's wrong with pearl necklace? Right? We went to the commercial break, and they told me I died the death of a dog. I couldn't.
Oh,
So that was my most embarrassing moment on television.
Well, I mean, we're on Graham Kennedy.
It's a good segue.
Now, so let's just
Nice segue.
use it,
Well,
right?
maybe explain what it is for our non-Australian listeners, what the show was. And
Look, the show was a groundbreaker because up until that time, news and light entertainment was sacrosanct. There was a brick wall between them, right? News was news. You didn't fiddle with it. It was straight news. And light entertainment was Graham Kennedy, Don Lane, Bert Newton, singers, dancers, The Wheel, where you won a prize. That show was the first show that actually combined news with light entertainment. I would read the straight introduction into the story as the, quote, straight man, and then would come out of the story and he would do the joke. He would do the gag. And everybody would laugh and then we'd go into the next story. So we actually did that crossover where we merged news and we were the first show to do it. And because of its success, we saw other shows like The Project, The Drama and all these other shows follow suit. And Andrew Denton and other, great, I've forgotten his name for the moment, but Rove.
Rove McManus. Yeah,
Rove McManus. He was fantastic. So we actually pioneered that new genre of merging news and light entertainment. So it shocked a lot of people. It took a while for people to sort of get it, but once they got it, it was top rating. And
fantastic.
And the channel loved it. I'll tell you why. The channel loved it because they used to charge a prime time rate, which used to cut out, like was from 6 till 8:30 or 9 o'clock, where advertising was prime time. And you'd charge, say, $30,000 for a half-minute commercial.
Wow.
Then you'd go into shoulder, which was a bit cheaper because it was between 9:30 and 11:30. And then you'd have overnight where it was cheap as chips to advertise because there was hardly anybody watching. Because our show rated so highly and it went where at 10:30 and finished at 11:30, it enabled Channel 9 to charge prime time for another 3 hours.
Wow.
So they made a fortune out of the show. So as a consequence, Graham and I, for that year, we had limos taking us to all the best restaurants. We were using helicopters to fly to places. 9 gave us bottles of Grange and champagne because we were making a fortune that they weren't making before. So we changed the parameters of prime time to be on shoulder. Yeah.
This was Kerry Packer.
This was Kerry.
He would have loved you guys.
He did. He didn't always love some of the humour.
So Graham could push it.
Well, yeah, but here's the other thing. That was Graham on air. Graham off air was a very different person.
Really?
Yeah. See, unlike, say, Norman Gunston, who was Gary MacDonald in real life, but then he put the funny hair and the shaving cuts. He turned into a character. Right? He was Norman Gunston. He wasn't Gary MacDonald. Graham Kennedy's great skill was that what you saw on TV, you thought was him.
Yeah.
And he would say to me, John, I'm an actor. That's my act, right? When we'd go to a restaurant, we'd always sit in the far corner and he'd sit with his back to the restaurant so that people would drive him nuts. They'd want to come up and tell him a joke. And he'd turn around and he'd say, I wrote that joke 10 years ago, piss off.
Yeah.
You know? And he used to love it he used to love it. There was a famous Greek restaurant, and it's just rebirthed actually in Newtown called the Steki.
Steaky,
Oh,
yes.
Remember the Steki?
He loves
the
Steki.
original Steki.
Yes.
And it's rebirthed now on Enmore Road.
Correct.
I believe.
Yeah, Paul.
We love it.
But the original Stecky was, and he used to love me taking him there. And when we used to take the show to Melbourne, he always wanted to have dinner at my mum and dad's because he loved mum's cooking. And so mum every Easter sent him guludia and yeah. So
What was that bit with the kuluria?
Oh.
Yeah,
that was so. Now this was I was set up on this one because
That's fantastic.
This was Greek Easter, right? Now we had the red eggs,
Yeah.
And he said, "All right, John, explain to me what happens with the red eggs." Right? And I said, "Well, they're boiled eggs, they're painted red, and the family members smash them, and whoever's egg survives, they get good luck for the next year." What they didn't tell me. And that's how it went in rehearsal, right? What they didn't tell me was that his egg, they deliberately was a raw egg, not a boiled one.
Yeah.
So when I smashed it, his egg went everywhere, and he stood up, and he was wearing his sovrako because he never wore pants in the show. Right? And there's egg everywhere, and I lost it because I didn't. It surprised me. I didn't know it was going to happen. And then I also,
He had his boxer shorts on.
not boxers. He had like mini briefs.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And he stood up.
Oh, you could see his bulaki. Anyway,
You can see his grams.
but I gave him guludia, and he tasted it, and he said, And he said,
I've never had anything like it.
I've never had anything like it. I said, I'm glad you like it. He said, I didn't say I like it. I just said, I've never had anything like it. Guys, I've got to tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about him.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to move on, right? But people are interested.
No,
obviously.
let's talk about it.
So he had a beautiful double-story penthouse right in, for people who are not in Sydney, Kirribilli, which is right on the water, right opposite the Opera House, the Harbour Bridge on this side. Are we having a little?
Have a little tip.
Yeah, we are.
Yamas.
Yamas. It's getting good.
Yeah.
That's the sign that it is going.
Yeah, good.
mate.
So we had the Harbour Bridge to the right. The Opera House was right there, and there was like 2 metres of foreshore. And I'm meeting him for lunch for the first time at his home, and he's cooking for me, and he's in the kitchen, and I'm at the front enjoying the view while he's, in the kitchen, and nervously I go, "Gee, Graham, this is a magnificent view. It's amazing." And he comes out of the kitchen with his apron on, and he goes, "Yes, John, but you see that bit of foreshore along the front there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you realise that people copulate on that foreshore at night?" And I said, I was being very agreeable. I said, "Really?" He said, "Most inconsiderate." And I'm thinking inconsiderate as in syringes, condoms, rubbish.
Yeah.
He said, "Do you realise how hard it is to hold a pair of binoculars in one hand?"
Clown. That is funny.
Oh, jeez. And I mean, this is one of the legends of Australian TV.
Oh, mate, he was the legend. He was the king.
Yeah.
He was the king.
His nickname.
And there'll never be anybody like him because we don't do variety anymore. It was a different era.
And he could get away with so much.
Look, I was just telling someone the other day, we used to get a lot of, people loved us, right? But we'd get complaints.
Yeah.
And you'd say to people who'd write in and complain, if you don't like it, change the channel. Yeah. But they still kept watching. Yeah. And they'd write, you filthy little dirty old man and all this sort of stuff. And one lady wrote in, Graham, will you ever say anything positive about anybody on your show? And he read it out and he said, yeah. He took his glasses off. He said, I'll say something positive. You are a slut. Now, it got a huge laugh. Yeah. But, you can't say that on TV. You couldn't get away with that today. No. We've become so politically correct.
But it's funny because he's saying it.
Yes.
And we know what he's like.
Yes, and
that's
it was his timing. People would say, your joke, producers would say, these jokes are 100 years old. Yeah. And he'd say, someone turns 11 every day, which means there's always someone who hasn't heard them. But he also had a particular way of delivering the joke. Timing. You can't learn timing. True. You either have it or you don't. And he was brilliant
master
at
at it.
timing. He knew when to pause. He knew when to do the goggle eyes. He knew when to look away. You know, I used to say of Graham, he knew everybody. You know, he was notorious for his temper, right?
Tom's lost
But he
I'm still thinking about the story.
Now, binoculars in one hand. Now, get that off.
Sorry.
But the reason for the tantrums was because he made a point of knowing the lighting man's job, the audio man's job, the producer's job, his job.
Yeah.
And he and I used to rehearse in the dressing room, and he expected me to know my job. So he never ever told me off because I was, you know, the consummate professional. But if somebody, you know, if he wanted an echo at a particular point in the joke because, you know, it made it funny, and the sound man goofed, well, he'd go nuts because he'd go, hang on, I know my job, I've done my job, he's done his job. You have failed me and made me look bad. And that's when he'd do the temper tantrums, not for no reason. He wasn't a bitter person. He was a very shy person.
Very
actually.
thorough.
Another funny thing is he retired to the Southern Highlands of New South Wales. And I used to go and visit him every weekend. I was single at the time. And I'd go to the fish market because they didn't have a fish market down in the Highlands. And you'd say, I feel like prawns or I feel like snapper. And I used to love taking, and we'd cook it up. And we'd have a couple of glasses of wine and I'd have a snooze on his recliner and I'd get in the car and drive home. And along the way, we'd crack jokes and look at movies and all sorts of stuff. And at his house, he would set the table up like Qantas, because he used to travel Qantas first class. Mm-hmm. So when you sat at the table, he would have the Qantas knife, fork, plates, which were in those days Westminster Wedgwood, with the gold ring and the little gold kangaroo. Sure. The little square salt and pepper shakers from first class. And he knocked all this stuff off over the years from Qantas.
Wow.
So that when you were a guest in his home, it was like being Qantas first class.
Yeah.
So anyway, I called him one day and I said, Graham, I'm going to be out of touch for a few days. I'm flying to Perth to do a gig. He said, John, if you don't mind me asking, are you flying Ansett or Qantas? I said, Qantas. He said, fantastic, because I've broken a saucer. Can you get me a saucer? I said, of course. And I get on a plane and I think, do I ask for one or do I nick one?
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll do the right thing, I'll ask. So I said to the crew, because they all recognised me, oh, you work with Graham. I said, look, Graham's broken a saucer and he wants one. Do you mind, if I take one, if you give me one? Yeah. The crew said, don't worry about it. Leave it. Of course we will. Wait till we get off the plane. When you disembark, we'll give it to you. And I had this funny feeling they'd forget, right?
Yeah.
So when they served us, I slipped the saucer in my bag just to be on the safe side.
Yeah.
Then when we got off the plane, they remembered and gave me another saucer. So when I came back, because in those days we used to communicate by fax.
Right.
Because he liked that, because that gave him control. Mm. And I triumphantly wrote this fax that said, Graham, triumph, not one, but two saucers, as if, bravo Yanni.
Yeah.
And he wrote back straight away, shit, now I need another cup.
Oh, jeez. Classic.
So, yeah, look, I've got a million stories like that. But
he was Greek connection stories. Like I think you had a few.
Look, he loved Greeks.
Yeah?
One of his uncles was Italian. People thought he took the piss out of me, but we rehearsed everything. And he always said to me in the dressing room, if you're uncomfortable with anything, tell me and we won't do it. He wasn't actually taking the piss out of me. Mm. He was having fun with our culture. He said, if you're going to pick on a nationality, he said, pick on Eskimos, because there's not many of them in Australia. They're not going to affect the viewers. So why would he insult Greeks when so many Greeks were watching the show?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was having fun with our culture. Yeah. Some people thought he was taking the piss, but he wasn't. Mm. He was actually having fun with the culture. Yeah. And if you go to YouTube, and to people listening to us, and if they still care to remember those days, you'll see that the nature of the joke now retrospectively. He was actually celebrating Greek culture. He wasn't taking the piss out of John. What would happen, however, though, is we'd rehearse it in the dressing room beforehand, and I'd know what he was going to say. But somehow when we got into the studio, he would deliver it that little bit differently, and that's what would crack me up. Because I'd expect him to come back with, one way, and he'd do it a different way, and that's what would crack me up. And and that's when, we had a lot of fun.
He seemed to have a knack of making the people around him break. I mean, the way that he would break Ken Sutcliffe as well.
Yeah, Ken, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, well, Ken did the first 6 months of the show, and then he got Whitewater Sport. Yeah. And Ken was notorious for having, getting tears in his eyes. And he said, I love it when you cry. Yeah. He called me the Golden Greek. He called me the Calamari Kid. He called me all these.
Calamari. Yeah. That should be the title of this episode. John Mangos, the Calamari Kid.
Classic.
So he'd come up with all these nice, the Greek Adonis, all this, but it was all done. It was all done affectionately.
Yeah.
And the only time he ever told me off, because we had a genuine friendship. And in many ways, he nurtured me. He liked being my mentor. I took him to the Stecky restaurant in Newtown, which for people who don't live in Sydney is in an inner city suburb. And I drove him home to Kirribilli, not a long drive, maybe a 15-minute drive home. And then he said, would you like to come in for a drink? I said, sure. And I could tell something was bothering him. And I thought, what's wrong? And then he turned around red-faced in a rage. Don't you ever drive your car without your seatbelt on ever again. That is against the law. Now get out. That's how much he loved me. Yeah. Seriously, wow. Seriously, that was love. That was something a father or an uncle would say. It made an impact.
Wow.
So that's the only thing. One other thing he told me off about was we were doing a commercial and the call time was 3:00. Mm-hmm. And we were in hair and makeup, and we had this very gay hairdresser who loved playing with my hair. Yeah. And I'm going, Kevin, I've got to be in the studio at 3:00. He said, I'll only be a few minutes longer. I walk into the studio 2 minutes later, 2 minutes after 3:00, and he went, don't you ever be late for a call time again. If I'm here at 3:00, you're here at 3:00. I said, but Kevin was fussing with my hair. I don't give an F. Yeah. Your call time is 3:00, you be here at 3:00. That was the only, and that was a sign of his professionalism. Yeah. That wasn't a sign of him being an asshole. Yeah. That was him being professional.
Yeah, wow. Very articulate with things like that. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. So that was the Graham era, but
amazing.
So maybe give us what are some of your highlights? It sounds like the Graham Kennedy show was one of the highlights.
Canberra was a highlight because I got to know. Yeah. I travelled the world with foreign ministers and prime ministers. Yeah. So that was a highlight.
So you feel like you hit your peak in your career doing that?
Early peak. Yeah. Because I went from being a local Melbourne reporter to a national reporter. So then people started to know me in Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane. Yeah. So I developed my national profile. And also I was hobnobbing it with some, with prime ministers and foreign ministers and stuff. That was a highlight. Then getting promoted to Sydney to be the state political reporter, chief state political reporter, when Neville Wran was the Premier of New South Wales. That was an interesting time because that was a very different era, very violent era in politics. It was gloves off. Now it's very politically correct and all very soft. But in those days, they used to go for each other hard. And then I got the promotion to Los Angeles, and that was the highlight because when I got to LA, I thought, I'm only going to get one chance at this. I'm only going to be here for 2 or 3 years because it's a rotating post. And as the plane was landing, I remember thinking, I'm not going to waste one day of this because it's not going to last forever. And I can say in all honesty, I did not waste one day. I couldn't wait to wake up every morning to do the next story. And on the days off, I played golf at the famous American golf courses. Yeah. I lived in Beverly Hills.
Fantastic.
All right. So I didn't get to save as much money as I should have. But I thought if I'm going to live in Los Angeles, I may as well live in Beverly Hills, right?
Were you single at the time?
I was single at the time.
My God.
I was single. I had a company car and a company expense account. Can you imagine how naughty Johnny was in those days?
You had a company car? Oh, my God.
Yeah, so but that's when the money was, when television was a money tree.
Yeah.
That was before, what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When television was a license to print money. And at that time, Alan Bond had just bought the station from Kerry.
Ken Packer, that's
and
right.
no one questioned our expense accounts. I travelled first class everywhere. Then when Kerry bought it back from Alan Bond for half price, everything tightened up again. But by then I was back in Australia and making a fortune for the network, working alongside Graham. So that worked out pretty well. And then because the early days of Sky News has deteriorated disgracefully since I was there. But it was owned 1/3 by Channel 9, 1/3 by Channel 7 and 1/3 by Murdoch's Fox, right? And so Channel 9 seconded me to be one of the inaugural newsreaders, along with a guy called John Gatfield, because we were established newsmen, to try and get the station off the ground. And that was an interesting time because that's when it was a genuine 24-hour news channel. And it was nice to be part of a launch of something new. Australia hadn't had cable TV before and certainly hadn't had a 24-hour news channel before. So look, that was a bit of a highlight as well. And then when after Sky News, you'll like this story. Channel 7 in those days had a studio on Martin Place in Sydney, a bit like the one at NBC at the Rockefeller in New York City, where it was all glass and the public could see inside the studio. And I was at Sky News at the time, and I was walking down Martin Place, which for people who don't live in Sydney is, the main mall. And I looked at Ian Ross, who was a colleague and a dear friend, reading the news. Roscoe. And I thought, man, I'd love to read the news in that studio. Like, that just looks like such a fun gig. But I thought, that's never going to happen to me. Well, 2 or 3 years later, they didn't renew my contract at Sky because they wanted to cast for someone younger, cheaper and prettier. And Channel 7 rang me up and said, would you like to come and read our afternoon and late night news? And I said, are you kidding me? Out of the studio on Martin Place? And they said, yeah. I couldn't get there quick enough.
Yeah.
And I did 3 years there, and that was my last main gig as a permanent, daily newsreader. And then since then I do spots on Channel 9 now as a commentator. I go on with a female. They pair up male-female every morning. And they give us the top 2 or 3 stories of the day, and we discuss, we opine. It's opinion because the story is already out there. So, John, what do you think? Was Susan Lee right to sack Price? Was Albanese right to not apologise? And we'd give our opinions.
To that point, at the time of recording this morning, in fact, I mean, everyone that's going to be listening to this will probably listen to it about a week afterwards. But this morning, pretty shocking story out of the US with the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
In the spirit of what you just spoke about, can you opine on that? What are your feelings and what were your initial thoughts about that this morning?
Mate, America is a gun culture country. Of course people are going to get shot. Of course people are going to get assassinated. Of course idiots are going to blow up, shoot kids in schools. Kids in schools in America do drills on where to go if they hide under the desk and stuff like that. The best thing that John Howard ever did after Port Arthur, right?
This is the discussion we had this morning.
Is it? Well, there you go. I mean, John Howard's ratings went whooshka because he said, right, we're having a moratorium. No one's going to get the blame. Hand your guns in. This is going to be a no-guns country. And as a consequence, we don't have shootings in schools and we don't have we don't have assassinations. No, exactly. Yeah. But it's a gun culture country. And it's in their constitution because it goes back to the Wild West days when they had, were allowed to carry a gun to protect themselves. We've never been that sort of a country because, okay, I'm going to get a little bit political here and I'm going to opine, because we savaged one of the most beautiful races in the history of mankind. We absolutely savaged the Aboriginal race, a race that has been here for 60,000 years. We came and stole their land and shot their asses off, right? Unlike New Zealand, where they formed a treaty, unlike America, where they paid the local Indians for Manhattan. Not very much, it was just a few beads, but it was a transaction. In Australia, those English explorers, Cook and Co., said it was terra nullius. You know what terra nullius means?
Empty land? Or
Yeah,
vacant?
it doesn't belong to anybody. There was all these mavri everywhere.
Yeah.
But they just didn't count them as human beings. You've
Well,
seen,
they were classified as fauna until,
yeah.
1967,
And
I think it was.
I'm sure I know I did at school. The photos, the black and white photo of the white guys with the Aborigines sitting on the floor with the chains around their necks and around their ankles. Who does that? We stole this country from them. So I'm very passionate about reconciliation. I'm very passionate about the apology, and I'm very sorry that we lost the referendum on a voice to Parliament, because this is a beautiful race of people, and they've got an incredible relationship with the land, with the water, with nature, that we've got a lot to learn from. And we abused these people. We took kids from their mothers. It's just so embarrassing.
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago. And so I'm quite passionate about it. Also because I've got Aboriginal friends.
Yep.
And two in particular most people will have heard of. I'm very good mates with Adam Goods, who was an Australian of the Year, and Michael O'Loughlin, who have started the GO Foundation, which stands for Goods O'Loughlin, and they raise money for scholarships for young Aboriginal kids to go who can't afford to go to university. So they're doing some great work. Now, I've had these guys at my home for dinner because I wanted my kids to have role models, you know. And when I hear Adam in particular is Michael's a very urban guy. He's a businessman. He's got a cleaning business and he's doing very well. Adam does different things because Adam was very successful as a player and as an athlete. And, you know, he's a father of two. He lives here in Sydney, but every so often he's from South Australia. He goes off to the bush to spend time on his own on the land and to connect with the land. And he comes back. That's his. Well, I call Castellori's, or my happy place that recharges my batteries. That's what he does to recharge his. And I wanted my kids to hear it from his mouth, because he was Australian of the Year. And he won 2 Brownlow medals.
Definitely.
You know, so he's a pretty impressive fella.
Yeah.
I've heard the story from their side of the fence, and I've also interacted with Aboriginals, and their culture is just beautiful. We ruined them. We introduced the alcohol that they had no tolerance to, because they hadn't, you know, unlike the Europeans who had a tolerance to alcohol, they had none. So we destroyed their culture.
Yeah.
And I feel terrible about that. And also, since we're on the subject, I also feel terrible about the Union Jack being on my Australian flag.
Right.
Because I'm Australian, right? I'm a Greek Australian, very proud Greek Australian. I'm also a Greek. I've got a Greek passport.
Yes.
But I'm proud to have been born here. What's the effing Union Jack doing on my flag? I've got nothing against the Union Jack. It's a beautiful flag. But how do we three Greeks, how do we relate to that? Why isn't the Greek flag on the Australian flag? There's plenty of Greeks here. Why isn't the Italian? Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm very much in favour of changing the flag, not for any other reason than the Union Jack doesn't belong there. It just doesn't belong there. And how many other countries have got somebody else's flag on their flag? Like it's time we grew up.
Yeah.
And also, for me, it's a constant reminder of our ugly past. Anyway, that's just my opinion. So I'm very passionate. I'm very passionate about.
Well, that's what it's all about.
You know, I'll tell you a funny story, boys. You know, there are plenty of Greek Aborigines up in the Northern Territory.
We've heard this, actually.
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened when Cyclone Tracy went through and destroyed Darwin. I don't know if you know this, but the island of Kalymnos is famous for its builders. So when when Darwin was flattened, a few of the builders came out looking for work, and they wrote back to their brothers and cousins and said, there's the whole city here, right? So, and they left their wives behind, and they came to Darwin and started rebuilding Darwin, and fathered all the.
They got busy building.
And in their spare time, they were fathering young, obviously local kids. So when I went up there, used to go up there and compare the Glendy, which is the festival they have every year. You'd see this little Aboriginal boy, handsome as, with green eyes and beautiful skin. His name's Dimitri. Yeah, and I just thought that was lovely. But a lot of the Kalimians made their money, went back, but a lot of them stayed. Yeah. So there's quite the big Greek community in Darwin. And
I think we dedicated a whole episode to Kalymnos.
We did.
And we worked out, I think it was 10% or 15% of the population were Kalymnian.
In Darwin, like even because they were famous for sponge diving and building. And also...
Well, the Kassies were up there sponge diving, weren't they?
Yeah, that was Nick Paspaley, and I'll tell you about him in a sec. Yep. They were famous for sponge diving, right?
Oh, and pearls.
Building. Well, that's the Paspaley.
Pearl necklaces, not pearl necklaces.
and also famous for a song, Diddla Da.
Yes.
Now, what the hell does that mean? Or diddla da, or diddla da. What does that mean?
Diddla da, yeah.
Did George explain it?
I think we had someone translate
George
it. I think it was about a
fisherman
singing, going out and singing songs about the land and all that sort of
thing. I think John's going to tell us.
No, I don't. I don't know. I just find it amusing. Oh, diddla da, oh, diddla da, na, na, diddla da.
That's it.
And I love it. It's a beautiful tune. And if you look on the web too, there's another one. Nana Muscuri.
Yes.
Danny Kaye. And
yes, I think I know what you're going to say.
Famous South American singer. Yeah. And
I'm just trying to think who the other bloke was.
Yeah.
It wasn't...
it was an actor, wasn't he?
Yeah. Harry Belafonte.
Yes.
Harry Belafonte.
He was Italian, wasn't he?
No, he was West Indian.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. Harry Belafonte.
Okay.
And there's a video clip of the three of them. And this is on American television.
Yeah.
And Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
He was, I don't know if you've seen much of his work.
He sung it in Greek.
Yeah. He was amazing because he was Jewish.
Yeah.
And he never learnt music, but he could conduct an orchestra. He was a brilliant actor. He was a funny guy. And he sang, and he could sing in all these languages. He was fantastic. He did that with Nana Muscuri.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the Paspaley family.
Right.
So they're one of the richest families in Australia.
Yeah. So
everyone will know their pearls, Paspaley pearls.
Yeah. So it goes like this. Nick Paspaley, the original, came out on the same ship as my papu.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So this is 1918. Right. And they went to Melbourne because Uncle Mick, the oldest of the four Mangos brothers, said, right, we're settling in Melbourne because that's where we're going to put our cafe. And Nick Paspaley, who'd been a sponge diver, got itchy feet because he couldn't dive in Melbourne. Port Phillip Bay was, there was nothing to
disgusting.
Right. And he said to my paput the Lesky, where they used to play cards, not for money but for matchsticks.
Yeah.
For matchsticks.
Oh wow.
Yeah. He said, I'm going up north because I want to dive. I want to, and he wanted to dive for sponges, which of course there were none there. But he first started finding diving for oysters, and then from the oysters were the pearls, and then it just grew from. And it's going to sound terrible. And Bapu said to me once, "Yatita pasikivre damavra." The sufane.
Wow. Why are you going up there? The blacks are going to eat you.
Yeah. But he was determined. He went up there, and now Paspaley is the biggest pearling company in the world.
Amazing.
Amazing story.
Speaking of that, my mother was not a racist, okay? This is Greek humour at its best. My mother was the least racist person in the world. When I came to Sydney and I'd ring Mum, what would be the first question that every Greek mother would ask?
FAS.
The FAS, exactly, FAS, right? And the second question is, because I was living in an apartment on my own, who's cleaning the apartment? I said, I had this Korean couple, husband and wife. Now, how do you explain to your Greek mother Korean? I said, look, I've got these Genesi who come in for a couple of hours every week.
Yeah.
Because I knew she'd understand Genesi. She's not going to understand Korean.
Yeah.
Bravo moromo, hafta Genesi dulevone san mavri. But she didn't mean it in a bad way. Yeah.
This is another generation disclaimer, guys.
Yeah. She didn't mean it in a bad way.
Yeah.
She meant it in an endearing way,
Yes.
to say they're hard workers.
Yeah. What a classic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
fantastic.
I want to talk a little bit about the influence that Greece has, not just on Australia, maybe Western civilization as well.
Yeah.
We all get the stories, growing up, Greece did this. And
Democracy,
invented this and all.
civilization,
Absolutely.
philosophy.
Yes.
It's all true.
What is it? I mean, for you, how proud does it make you? What does it feel?
Okay, you know what? I'll tell you. I've got a very definite answer to that. When I was growing up in Melbourne, I disowned my Greekness because I was called a wog.
Okay.
And I was the only Greek. We had one Italian, one Guinezo. So the Aussies used to pick on me and the Italian, and we used to pick on the Guinezo. So the only way to get accepted, right, I thought, at the time, was disown my Greekness, and I became a very good footballer.
Which is very common. This is a common
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Common thing. Yeah.
And I became the captain of the team, and I won the under-17 best and fairest.
So we're talking about
So
soccer or AFL?
AFL.
AFL.
So I became a valuable player to the team. So suddenly I was no longer John the Wog. I was the captain of the team who could play. And so that's how I won over my Anglo friends and felt I was part of them. Then when I went to Greece for the first time at age 21, 22 with my cousin, and we had dinner in the Blaka one night, and in those days there were no fences around the Acropolis, and you could walk through it, and it was lit. And after dinner in the Blaka, we walked up there, and it took my breath away. And you know what? I went, nah, Vlaka, you gave this up to play football for the Australesi. When I came back to Australia, I made a concerted effort to relearn the language, which, obviously we heard it at home, but I didn't use it. I don't listen to any other music than Greek music. As I think I mentioned earlier, I'm friends with George Delaris, and I was very proud to bring him to Australia.
You've got to mention that story. We'll wrap up with that.
I brought him out 3 times, but the second time was, after the first time was a success. That was at the Hordern Pavilion, and that went well, and we got to know each other, and we really clicked. And he said, when you come to Greece, you've got to look me up. And he said, now you've got to stay at my house, and we used to go out. He'd take me. Anyway, and we're out on his boat one day, and as I mentioned earlier, he said, I've done Royal Albert Hall, I've done Carnegie Hall. He said, the one place I really want to do is the Sydney Opera House. And I said, look, I'll organise it. I'd never organised anything like this before in my life. And so I rang the Opera House and a few other contacts, and I got an orchestra together. And anyway, long story short, we did 2 sellout shows at the Sydney Opera House that people still come up and say to me, that was the best concert I've ever been to. Because can you imagine George, who is an amazing singer, still singing,
Icon.
at the Opera House in that beautiful environment, doing our songs. And I get a bit emotional because at the moment, George is in now the twilight of his career, and Argyros is the new star. And I don't know if you've seen the video clip, but I get emotional when in the middle of Athinamo at the Royal Albert Hall, he looks up and he points, he says, Mana, kita, o yosu gani zebekikos, the Royal Albert Hall. In other words, they used to make fun of us because we were the low Greeks. Look at me, I'm doing our dance, our zebekiko, in the hall where the royal family come to watch their shows.
Unbelievable.
And I love, every time I see that, I get emotional.
That's brilliant.
Mana, kita, o yosu gani zebekikos, the Royal Albert Hall. How good is that?
Wow.
Unbelievable.
How good is that? And he's coming to Australia.
He is,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's coming, I think, in September, October.
Yeah, I'd give us
But don't even think about getting a ticket. They sold out in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
apparently.
we heard.
Yes.
Yeah. One final little funny George
Here we
story.
go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I used to live near Circular Quay, so I used to go running around the quay every morning. Now, I brought George for the Opera House concert. He stayed at the Marriott Hotel, which is very close. So we used to just walk around the Circular Quay. Now, I used to run every morning around there, and there was this Aboriginal guy used to play the didgeridoo. He was a busker, and
Same guy down there all
Near
the
the
time?
station. Near the station.
Yeah.
I remember
And
this
he's-
bloke.
Yeah, and his mates in Darwin. He's from Darwin. We're all Greeks. And he recognised me. And as I ran past one morning, he put the didge down and he went, "Yasu Yorgo." And I said, "No, I'm not Yorgo. I'm Yanni." He said, "Melene Mavrospiro." I said,
Wow.
I said, "What's the story?" He said, "I grew up with Greeks in Darwin. I come down to Sydney to make a bit of money and I go back. And every morning I'd run past, Galimera, Yoro, Galimera, Yanni, Mavrospiro, Galimera, Yanni." So some months later, I'm walking with George Delaris to do a concert, to do a rehearsal in the morning.
Yeah.
And Mavrospiro's there playing,
Yeah.
okay? And I'm there with George, and George is intrigued by the sound. You're going to love this.
Yeah.
And Mavrospiro looks up and he goes, "Yasu Yorgo." And Delaris thought he was saying it to him.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell him the truth.
Yeah.
I said, "A pistefto. A pistefto." A pistefto. He was shaking his head. And to this day, I still haven't told Delaris the truth because I didn't want to spoil the mystique.
Let the mystique roll on. That's a good one.
Classic.
Perriero. A pistefto. He just couldn't believe it.
Classic.
I love that. Yasu Yorgo.
Even the Aborigines know you.
Yeah, exactly.
What a
Exactly.
classic.
It is
That's the impact of the Greeks, mate.
well, you asked the question, the impact of Greeks on culture. We are everywhere. When I lived in America, let me tell you something else. Sorry, I know we're running out of time.
No.
Go for it.
We can go all night if you want.
I travelled the country covering stories. In every Greek town in America, in every American town, there's a Greek restaurant, right? And when I was travelling on my own without a crew, like using a local crew, if I'm a story, where was I going to go and eat, right? If there wasn't a famous restaurant that I wanted to particularly try, I'd ask the concierge at the hotel, where's the Greek restaurant? And the hospitality that I used to get when they is Helenas, and they could tell I had the Australian accent. Apupu, Australia. And we'd start chatting, and I just found that lovely that we're everywhere, and our culture is everywhere. And since, the Battle of Crete and other things, people love us.
Yeah.
People appreciate, we've made our mistakes, but people love us generally because we are very hospitable. We are very loving.
Yeah.
We have, what is it, xenophilia? Is that what's the
Philoxenia.
Philoxenia.
And that's what we've got. And
Definitely.
that's one of our gifts, I think, to the world.
Yeah.
Philoxenia and philotimo.
Yeah, and philotimo, which is a word you can't translate in Australia. And
In English, yeah.
I defy anybody listening to us now who hasn't got a Greek mate in their circle of friends. Seriously.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Well said, mate.
Wow.
Bravo, Caristo.
Mate, it's like a mic drop, mate.
I know.
That's it. We're done.
No better way to do a mic drop than with one of Australia's best and most recognisable broadcasters. An inspiration to myself personally, and I know for Nick as well.
Thank you.
John, it's been unbelievable.
Let me tell you, I've done a lot of these sorts of interviews, and I have not enjoyed any of them as much as I have with you two today.
It's the alcohol talking.
Well, it's the Ozaki, but it's also we covered a lot of territory, and we've done it with a lot of love, and I hope people enjoy listening to us. And thanks, guys, you're doing great work.
Thank you so much.
I'm a big fan. You know that.
Oh,
So,
so good.
Couldn't believe it when you said it to me over the phone, John. Honestly, I've got goosebumps. Thank you so much. Honestly.
Look, and we're a big fan too. And thanks for filling up our lounge room with your voice and the news and all that sort of stuff.
It's my
we definitely
anytime.
used to sit around. It was great history, great memories with you.
Feel free to invite me back.
Yeah, we'd love to. Absolutely. Be careful what you wish for, John.
Okay.
We may call you back.
Definitely. 100%.
Well, ouzotalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media at ouzotalk and at ouzo_talk. Nick Athanasiou, thank you very much. John Mangos, thank you very much, gentlemen.
I thank you. Nase kala.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Ouzo Talk is produced, written and presented by Tom Skolarikas and Nick Athanasiou. Our theme music is written and played by Peter Apostolidis, with additional music from George Kalapidis and bouzouki legend Thanasis Polikadriotis.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.